You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Callie Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Callie Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
You are listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. I am the CEO and founder of the Addictions Academy, the largest online school for addiction studies. We're in 23 countries and 5 languages, and also CEO and founder of the Addictions Coach and Now Fixed Failure to Launch. I am very excited for my guest today because he's very similar to me. He's all over the place and has done so many things with his life, and it's so awesome. I want you to welcome Thomas Shanahan, and he is an attorney out of New York known for his civil rights work. He is also the author and president of Spiritual Adrenaline, which is a fantastic book that just came out. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you so much, Dr. Estes, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad you're here. You have energy like I do. You're like on 11, which is awesome.
Hopefully we're both putting it to a good use. I think we are.
I think so. So let's start here. So you're an attorney in New York working with people, and then all of a sudden you write a book like on fitness and adrenaline and spirituality, which is like polar opposite of what you do. So let's start with what you did first. Tell me about being an attorney. Tell me what you do, how it's different. Because you know the show is all about people that have done something unique and awesome. Tell us what makes you unique and awesome.
Wow. Thank you for saying I'm unique and awesome. Let's see if you think so after we're done. But I appreciate that. You know, my original area of interest was television. I was working in television after I got out of college, and my boss, who was a very, very nice lady who worked incredibly hard at a major television network that will remain nameless, was fired wrongfully. She was terminated and I was not. She was terminated, but it had to do with her race. And, I was given a promotion and moved to another unit, but I remember being in my early 20s saying, boy, that was really unfair what happened to that person. There wound up being a lawsuit over it, and they wound up settling that. But I said, it's really, that's not justice. That's what happened was wrong. And so I actually applied to law school. I was very active in politics and community affairs my whole life. And I went to New York Law School. And like I said, that incident with my boss was a big impetus for that. And then after law school, I got out. I was working part-time for the then public advocate Mark Green. While I was in law school, I worked for Mayor David Dinkins as well. So I went part-time, and I was working for elected officials here in New York. And I wanted to represent people as an attorney in civil rights that weren't didn't have equal access to attorneys at that time, and I picked the transgendered, and this was back in the late 1990s. I graduated from law school in 1997, and there were no private attorneys in New York City that would represent the transgendered, so I decided I was going to start doing that and specializing in LGBT rights, but with a focus on transgendered. And so I brought a whole number of cases against, at that time, Verizon was Bell Atlantic. I brought a case against Bell Atlantic for not allowing transgendered escorts to advertise. They allowed all kinds of other escorts to advertise except the transgendered. And we were able to get that changed. I represented transgendered someone named Amanda Lepore, who's very well known, who worked at a very large nightclub here in New York. When they fired her and said, "We're letting you go because we want to hire real women," we had hundreds of people.
That's what they said.
That's what they said. But you see, at that time, in the late 1990s, people actually thought it was okay. It was the last group that you could actually discriminate against, where everyone would look the other way because of who they were. So in that case, We had hundreds, this video on my YouTube channel, hundreds of LGBT activists showed up at the nightclub at 2 a.m, and it was just an amazing outpouring of support for Amanda. And, that club went out of business, and we wound up not being able to collect on a judgment, but we got a judgment against the club and its owners for a couple $100,000. So that was a really big deal. And then the big case that happened back then, which helped, you see, when I was doing this litigation, Christine Quinn was then very active in the New York City Council, and she became the speaker, but she introduced a bill, and she was fighting and lobbying very hard for a bill to add transgendered people, gender identity, to the New York City human rights law. And so while I was litigating, people like Christine Quinn and others were advocating in the political arena. So we were dual tracking this whole civil rights movement that was happening in the city. And the big case, and actually the day that the jury came back on this case was the same day that human rights bill was amended in the city council, just by chance. They happened on the same day. The big case back then was against Toys R Us, and there was 3 employees who were working at the Bensonhurst Toys R Us who actually chased my clients. There was 3 of them. They were shopping for Christmas presents. They chased them out of the Toys R Us and they had bats. They had taken bats from the sporting section, and they were saying, "Get out of the store, you she-males,
What?
man,
Really?
woman." Yes. And then you can Google this. You'll find.
My God.
You'll find we had rallies in front of the Times Square Toys R Us store.
What in the hell? Hang on. You can't make this shit up. Let
me tell you. Let me tell you, Dr. Arce, you're not going to believe this, but there's a quote. If you Google any of the articles about the case, the defense that Toys R Us raised in federal court in the Eastern District, we were before Judge Sifton, was, given who they are and what they look like, things are going to happen to them as they go about their business in the rough, mean streets of New York City.
What?
That's
This
their
is Manhattan.
defense.
This is not the rough streets of me. I lived in this station. There's no Times Square is not rough, first of all. So, and I know where the Toys R Us was. What in the hell?
They had an attitude that transgendered could be discriminated against. They lost. We went to a jury trial. It was the very first jury trial ever in the country, and involving transgendered plaintiffs, and we won.
Wow,
and
congratulations.
we wound up getting $197,000. So it was an expensive lesson for Toys R Us to learn,
Right.
And from there, I continued to do civil rights cases. The big case that I'm really well known, there's actually 2 of them. One was he was then state senator. He became the Attorney General of New York, Eric Shanahan. He and I sued the MTA many years ago when they raised the subway and bus fares, and we were able to show to a judge that they had lied to New Yorkers about their budget problems. And so the judge ordered the MTA to reverse a fare increase on the subways and buses. And it was an amazing case. And after it was announced publicly, everybody in New York City was so excited about it. Everywhere I went, people were hugging me, thank you so much. And that was a really big case. And then one other one, there's actually 2. Another case involved, the rebuilding of the World Trade Center. And when the original plans for the Freedom Tower and the redevelopment site it was not up to the international building and fire codes. They failed to comply with the safety codes that were recognized nationally and internationally as important and as state of the art. And so they said, we're the Port Authority. We don't have to comply. We can do what we want. So I represented the New York City Fire Officers Association, which were all the firefighters, the senior firefighters, and I represented 20 families of victims of 9/11. And we sued not for money. We sued to compel the Port Authority to rebuild the new Freedom Tower and site in compliance with the international building and fire codes. And the reason it's important is when the buildings were attacked, the old buildings did not comply. They were built a long time before, but they had stairwells in the same areas of the buildings, right? The towers. So when the planes hit and the fire started, the explosion started, there was no way down because all the means of egress were damaged, right, and no one could get down. And so the new international building codes have, stairwells on the opposite sides of the building and are, they're the standard of care in these days. And the Port Authority, the original plans did not comply with those safety standards. And so our lawsuit, we wound up getting into negotiations with the Port Authority. And based on our lawsuit, the mayor at the time said there's merit to this lawsuit. They willingly sat down with New York City Fire Department and other entities, and they wound up changing the plans for the development site, so the case was withdrawn. But the intention was to bring public awareness to what was happening down there on behalf of families that already lost, members in the attack, and also the firefighters, because the New York City firefighters' position was, if they're not going to build the buildings to the highest possible safety codes in compliance with the international standards,
right,
we have to go in those buildings. We shouldn't have to go in those buildings if we're not going to do it. And so, so that's a case that I'm really, really proud of as well, And so I did cases like that in addition to representing, regular litigants. I had a specialty in women who were usually involved in domestic violence type situations, and they were getting divorced. I would handle the divorce in their custody cases, and I had a number of cases that were national news, involving, custody. And I still to this day represent mostly women, although some men, in some of those custody cases. And, they're tough cases, but I think, it's real important for kids to be with the parent that nurtures them, the one that, raises them. And I just feel that there's a lot of problems in the court system. And when it comes to these really high conflict divorces that involve young kids, and oftentimes involve very wealthy men and very powerful men and very successful men who have the money to really try and grind down their soon to be ex, and oftentimes who use the children as kind of like as a trophy, if you will, or a pawn. Yeah, and that happens all the time. So I do speak. There's a conference. It was just this past weekend. I didn't speak this weekend, but I've spoken many times. It's an annual thing here in New York at the Battered Women's Conference, which brings together many, many women from around New York State and actually from around the country as well to talk about these types of issues. And it's Mo Hanna is the organizer, and she's out of Siena College in Albany, New York. And so I think it's important to help and to be available to them whenever they ask me. So that gives you my background. That's what I did, my professional career.
That's awesome. So you've got like two sides here. So you have this professional person that comes in, you're like the archangel, you save people, you fix things, you make things
right.
Right? And then I know you from the other side, which is spiritual adrenaline. I didn't even know you were an attorney until I saw your bio come through. I'm like, wait, what? So tell me about what is the spiritual adrenaline? What does it mean? Okay. How did you get involved in that kind of stuff?
Sure. Okay. So, all the time I'm doing all these great things, right? I mean, I was very successful in my career, and things were going very well. But the reality was, I also was a really heavy drinker. I've been a heavy drinker in high school, where I grew up in New York City, because I did grow up here. Part of like the cool kid thing was to be at keg parties in the woods and blah, blah, blah. So I drank a lot, growing up in high school. Then in college, the same thing. And then in college, I was introduced to harder drugs like cocaine and that kind of stuff. I stopped doing drugs when I got out of college, but I always drank really heavily. And then working in politics, there's a lot of dysfunction in politics. And so there were plenty.
Wait a minute. Really?
Like I'm telling you something you don't know. It was crazy.
I had my first politician 4 years ago, and we did the Sober on Demand. So I flew to DC, and I get there, and I'm right next to the White House. And I'm back and forth between there and the Capitol building, and I'm working with this guy, and everything that came out of his mouth was a lie. And I sat him down, and I'm like, dude, listen, I totally get for your job function, your job is to lie. I get that. Yeah. However, I can't help you get sober if you're lying to me, because I can look at you and tell you you just got high, and you're telling me no, and the little drug test tells me yes. I'm not going to believe you. So that whole group of people, that's a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, because I think when I watch the news now, I see a lot of, to me, I can understand why things are so chaotic in Washington, because I just know whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be food, whether it be, other things, there's so much dysfunction in that world. And so I was part of that world. And, there's every night of the week, there's a different function you have to be at, and there's drinking involved and all kinds of things. And so, I had become a heavy drinker, and, that was true for most of my adult life. And then a whole host of things happened. I was appointed to a very high-level position in the Spitzer administration when Eliot Spitzer was governor. He wound up being caught, with a prostitute.
No.
He was called client number 9. And so there was a whole host of things that happened. And there was a lot of people who were collateral damage. You know, so David Patterson came in. There was this new inspector general appointed, because they said that the former inspector general was very close to the governor. And that person targeted me, for investigation along with other people for lots of different reasons. And what happened was he wound up, after investigating me for 2 years, didn't really find anything. I was never directed or arrested or convicted. I was never told to return money, but he went through all my travel vouchers and found mistakes. And he put out a very damning press release. So I was asked to resign. I said, I'm not going to resign because what you're doing is crazy. It was crazy. And so I said, you can fire me. So and they wound up firing me because I didn't want to admit that I had done anything wrong. So that happened. It was very public. It was in the papers all around New York State. And, that was a lot. And then I didn't go back to drinking because I knew that I had a propensity to use alcohol and drugs as a coping mechanism. So I actually went to an outpatient facility and I checked myself in as a preventive thing. And I was in that facility. I actually was very depressed, Dr. Estes. I will tell you, I was very upset about what happened because it was public and it was humiliating. But I wasn't drinking and doing drugs. And I went to go see a therapist and he gave me I was there for 15 minutes, and I'm not exaggerating. He was a pharmacologist who was recommended by someone I met at the outpatient treatment facility. And I was there with him for 15 minutes, and he gave me 5 different prescriptions, anti-anxiety medication, sleeping medication. What else? I can't remember. There was 5 of them all together. And so I was in the outpatient program, and I was taking the antidepressants and the anti-anxiety medication and everything else. And then back to back, in January 2010, my colleague, who I still share office space with now, her son, who was 18 years old, was paralyzed from the neck down in a snowboarding accident. She immediately wanted to leave and help with him with therapy, and she did. I told her I'd cover her law practice while she was gone so she wouldn't lose her business. So she left. I was covering her law practice, dealing with my law practice as well. And then 2 months later, on March 6, 2010, my brother, he's not my brother by blood, he's my cousin, but my mom and dad raised him. He was paralyzed from the neck down in a ski accident, believe it or not. Yeah, I know, in Sunday River up in Maine. So all of a sudden, I became really actively involved in his day-to-day financial affairs, his day-to-day health affairs. He had 3 kids, but they were in their early 20s, and they couldn't handle being around their father with this catastrophic injury. And so, on a daily basis, I was dealing with things up in Maine. I was flying back and forth quite a bit. He went to therapy in Atlanta, so I would fly down to Atlanta and spend some time with him and come back up, try a case. It was just crazy. And then 2 months later, my mom, who had never been sick, never smoked a cigarette in her life or drank alcohol, got throat cancer. And my sister was a wonderful human being, had 3 young kids at that time, and just could not help in taking my mom to chemo and radiation. So I started going back and forth to Albany to take my mom to chemo and radiation. Then I'd come back and try and work down here and make money. It was just chaotic. I dropped out of the outpatient clinic, and I stopped using all the medication because I didn't like the way it made me feel, like cold turkey. And so I basically couldn't function at all. And I had all these responsibilities. So I was like, I went back to what I knew would work, and I went to my Coke dealer. I knew from the old days. That was my solution.
You're already on 11 sober. I can't see you on cocaine, for God's sake.
It's so funny. Even back then, people would say that to me. But you have to understand, I was so unhappy and so exhausted. It wasn't like I was going out to party and do it. I was trying to keep up with the demands being placed on me. I would start doing it, which was crazy, almost at the time I got out of bed. And it got to the point, because I came off those the antidepressants and the other drugs, I needed it to function. And then it's kind of reversed, because originally I would drink a lot and then go and use cocaine, but then the cocaine became, if you will, the gateway drug, and I needed Jack Daniels to bring me down because I couldn't sleep.
See, I totally get that, because my drug of choice was Rip Fuel, if you remember back in the day, Mahawang, Guarana, and a Fedra stack. And
sure.
Amazing stuff. I would lay in bed, take two, wait for it to hit, and bam, hit the ground running. We're going to do this and this and this and this and this. And that led to speed when they said no more. I was like, what do you mean no more?
Yeah.
Like, you can't buy it. So now it's like, well, what's next? So mine's a little, do speed because I was like, I really don't want to get into meth because then I'm not going to be functioning at all. So I totally get that. And then, harder things in life get, the more you reach for something. So
Yep.
how did you get
That's
yourself
what
out
happened.
of that? How did you?
Well, you got to remember, let me just say also one other funny thing about it. I didn't know this at the time, but I know this now, is that aside from dentists, lawyers have one of the highest, I think the second highest level. Suicide, but also substance abuse problems. The numbers, and it's a very, so I wasn't alone. Like I knew, in the courthouse. I mean, I hate to say this, but there was a lot of people, and I still see people that are struggling. It's just the dynamic of the job. It's a very, very mentally grueling job, and so the point is, it was awful. It got to the point where my colleague came back after 1 year off of taking care of her son. Her son, by the way, just graduated from NYU. He still uses the wheelchair, but he recovered greatly because she took that year off.
Right.
And he just graduated from NYU as a psychology major. So she came back and she saw because she was with me every day, how bad things were when she came back, and she talked to my mom because she's part of the family. So next thing you know, in May, I wound up in an inpatient facility, and when I got there, I was very sick. On the way there, I wound up stopping at a a heart unit in a local hospital because they were concerned I might have had like a stroke or something. So I was there for a couple of days, and then I wound up being admitted to a place called Conifer Park, which is in Albany, New York. And, I was happy I was there. I felt like things had gotten out of hand. I didn't know how to get out of it. So I felt like this, instead of being like unhappy to be there, I was thrilled. You want to know the truth? And I had been through, like when I was in the outpatient program, I was going to the program and I would go to meetings, 12-step meetings, but I would not participate. I would just sit in the back of the room. I had a sponsor who actually didn't work steps, so he didn't make me work steps. And I would text, I didn't change any of the people, places, and things. And obviously, when everything happened, the major things the next year, I completely imploded. So I didn't really have a recovery that was based on a strong foundation or really any foundation. So when I was an inpatient, I just started, really focusing, and I said, I'm going to do everything they tell me to do and more. Instead of trying to be in with the cool patients, the cool kids, I decided I want to be in with the ones who were not cool because they were doing the work. So I didn't want to come back and do it again. And so I really embraced recovery, and I learned from doing things the wrong way, going to meetings and not participating, how to do things the right way. And so I started, really focusing on that. Long story short, I went into rehab at 140. I came out at 177 pounds, right? Mm-hmm. And in the first 6 months of my sobriety, I continued to add weight. People would tell me, it's okay, don't worry about it, easy does it, it's your first year. And that's true to some extent, but I started to really smoke more in early recovery than I did at the end of my active addiction or during my years of addiction. I was putting on weight, I just wasn't happy, and I wasn't feeling good. I felt like my brain and the 12 steps were the 12 steps were working phenomenally for my brain and to get me mentally focused and kind of really engaged. And I was actually quite happy. But physically, my body wasn't. I was actually doing the opposite of my body. And I started to really realize, like, I would hang around with people who would smoke before the meetings, then we take cigarette breaks during the meetings. The first thing I do after would be to light up a cigarette, and I continued to smoke most of the day. And also that, like, when I wouldn't eat right, and then I would drink coffee with lots of sugar. And so I just realized this was not sustainable. And I felt that it was actually undercutting my chances of staying sober in the long run. And so that's when I decided, because I took a year off from practicing law. I worked part-time, actually, after I got out of the outpatient. And so I decided I really wanted to learn more about nutrition and exercise. So I did. I became I got certified as a personal trainer 2 or 3 years after I got out of that rehab. I did it, part-time. I got certified in nutrition as a sports nutritionist, and I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition to get an overview of different dietary theories. And so I started to integrate exercise and nutrition into the 12 steps. So I started to apply the steps to exercise and nutrition. And for me, that was an amazing experience, and it continues to be to this day.
So I'm just going to stop you right there. So that, for me, is so pivotal because there's people out there who find sobriety and they say, okay, I'm not using heroin, alcohol, whatever, but I turn around and they're eating donuts, they're eating cupcakes, they're not working out,
Exactly.
they're unhappy, they're bitching about everything, and I'm like, okay, well, but you're not sober. And we have this big debate. They go, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, sugar's a drug. Sugar pings your brain like cocaine and detoxes you like heroin, so if you're going to eat that Snickers bar and then tell me how clean you are, you and I are going to rumble because you're not clean.
There's a big difference between abstinence and sobriety. I'm 100% with you, right?
Yep. And then on top of that, people say to me, well, I'm clean and sober, but they're on Facebook, starting an argument or calling people names. And I'm like, you're not recovered because you might not be doing heroin today, but you're still an asshole. So when I work with people, I say it's not just stop using this substance, but you have to figure out the why. Why am I drinking? Why am I doing drugs? Why am I reaching for the Snickers bar instead of the apple? Whatever it is, whatever your vice is, figure it out, solve it, and then move forward. So when I work with clients, they come off sugar, they come off white flour, and their ass is in the gym. And they get so mad at me, they're like, well, this isn't what I signed up for. Yes, it is. This is what we're going to do. We're going to fix everything. So. Well,
you're 100% on the money. I didn't realize you integrated. I didn't realize you did that, and that makes sense now to me. That makes sense now. And what are your success rates when you do that?
We're 99% successful. But here's the thing.
I would imagine. Yep.
I don't take everybody. And I tell them flat out, I won't take you if I think you're going to fail because that's a reflection of me. So you have to be 100% committed to all of this. And people say, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm gluten-free. I'm sugar-free. I have to be. I don't have an option. So you have to treat this just like everything else. It's a lifestyle. It's not a diet. You have to work out. I work out 6 out of the 7 days a week. And you have to be committed because if you're not committed, your whole mindset is based upon what you eat. And people don't understand that. I'm like, if you eat a bagel, you're going to look like a bagel. And you're going to feel like crap. That's it.
100%. Let me just say too, what you're saying, it sounds so like revolutionary in the context of the environment around 12-step recovery and recovery in general. But it's common sense. And, in the book, and I have a whole chapter in my book on this topic because, people were saying, oh, you're attacking the 12 steps. You're this. I said, no, I'm not. I'm a big believer in the 12 steps. I was granted access to AA's World Services Research Library. I also had some access up at Stepping Stones. And, what was really interesting to me was that Dr. Bob and Bill W., all the early founders of the 12-step movement recognized that what you're saying is 100% true, Dr. Estes, and that, that the foods that people ate had a direct impact on their ability to stay sober. They came up with this list. They called these the sister foods to alcohol: refined sugar, soda, white bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, and French fries. And so those are the foods that the founders of the 12-step movement originally recommended people stay away from in early recovery. And so I say this because there's a lot more of the research in that chapter of the book, but it's not revolutionary. It's completely consistent with, with science now and the founding of the 12 steps. And I think it's important because I didn't realize you integrated it when you were working with your client. Now I understand why, because I did realize that you had a very high success rate. Now I understand why, because I just feel for whatever the reasons, oftentimes, the culture that's developed around certain recovery communities is completely inconsistent with the fundamental purpose of the community. And so, it's incredibly important. It was incredibly important for me to change because I knew that I wouldn't be able to make it in the long term if I hadn't made those changes. And that's why I wrote the book, because I was looking for like when I was trying to put all these pieces together, I couldn't find something. I didn't have a lot of money, couldn't go to a personal trainer, aside from taking the courses I mentioned earlier, it was very hard to really be able to fund this, especially, because in early recovery, it was like paying off taxes, it was paying off debt, this, that. And so I realized how difficult it can be for someone to put all the pieces together. And so that's why I wrote a book that talks about basic exercise science, basic nutrition science, basic hormones, vitamins, and minerals, and put it all into a step format that people can follow, because I just think it's a successful way to integrate these things into their lives. And that's what we're doing. And I mentioned to you earlier, in May of this year, 2019, WPIX television here in New York City is going to be following 3 people who've agreed to follow the lifestyle. These are people who have been in long-term recovery and all have put on substantial weight, all feel unhealthy in how they live, except for the fact that they've abstained from their drugs of choice, and all want something different because they're just not happy. In fact, one of them said to me, the option for him at this point after 5 years, he's so miserable in the sober lifestyle he's developed for himself that if he couldn't find a way to change it up, he was going to go back to drinking, because he said, why should I be sober and miserable? So I told him, I said, don't go back to drinking. Give it a shot and come and do this. I call it the Spiritual Adrenaline Challenge. I'm really excited to see how these 3 people, how things change for them. I hope and I believe in a positive way by investing 6 months with us and trying to change the lifestyle they're living.
That's excellent. And I'm really excited for this too, because I think this is a book that I can integrate. We teach fitness in recovery and nutrition in recovery.
I know you do. I know you do.
Yeah. So be prepared.
I know you, but listen, can I give you, and I'm not just giving you, I'm not plugging you because you had me on. I'm really excited to be here and I'm honored to be here, but you're one of the few. When I looked at the programs, I've looked at what you teach, and you're one of the few who gets it, in the sense what you offer at the Addictions Academy is like it's a rounded, holistic approach, right? It's not just piecemeal. You take the whole person, and I think that you deserve a lot of credit for that.
We're bringing on Darren Littlejohn for Buddhist 12-step.
I read his book, the 12-step.
I just had him on before you today.
Oh, did you really? I read his book years ago. I love that book.
So he's
the 12 Buddhist steps. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And Valerie Mason-John, Gabor Mate's right hand, she does the 8 steps for Buddhist recovery. So we're going to bring both of them on for the spiritual side, because we have the fitness, we have the nutrition, we have the recovery coaching, life coaching, we have all these pieces. Now it's the spiritual side, because there's nowhere to go. Like you said, you were looking around going, what do I do? There's no fitness in recovery. There wasn't, There's no nutrition. You have nutritionists who go, well, I don't know what to tell you about that. And then they don't understand the whole concept, of alcoholism and drug addiction and your cravings and your triggers. And it's like a disconnect. So I'm really excited about your book, and I'm really excited to have it on. We're going to put it up for you so people can purchase it directly from Amazon and from your site and everything.
That would be great. Dr. Estes, the logo for the book, if you look at our Facebook page or any kind of our social media, is 21 blades around the human body. And the body, the arms are out, the legs are together at the base. But, so one arm is exercise, one is fitness, and the base is spirituality. And the reason there's 21 blades around the person's body is it incorporates the 12 steps, the Eightfold Path, and the 21st blade represents the higher power of someone's choosing. And so, as I say in the book, what I tried to do, because I started to recognize early on that the Eightfold Path is so consistent with 12-step teachings. So I was actually living, a 12-step, along the Eightfold Path. And so they work so well together because there's such an integration of the concepts, And I'm a big believer in Buddhism. I was so grateful. I don't know if you know this about my background, but I was so grateful. I attribute being able to quit smoking, which I stopped 2 years after quitting alcohol and drugs, that I actually flew to Lumbini because I wanted to deliver in person a thank you note to Buddha at his place of birth. So I flew to Lumbini, Nepal.
Oh, wow.
And I left the original copy of my book there, and I said thank you because I was starting to write the book, but I was chain smoking as I was doing it. So I said, you're a hypocrite. Cut it out, okay? So because I was able to quit smoking, I said there's enough hypocrites in the world. You can't write a book about health and a healthy lifestyle and recovery and chain smoke while you're doing it. That's ridiculous. So when I finally quit smoking and I finished the book in 2015, I took the original manuscript there and I left it as a thank you note for him. And then I promised, I said, if the book ever gets published, I'm going to come back, but I'm going to go to the place where you found enlightenment. So in 2018, in October of 2018, I actually went back to India, to the actual spot. There's a temple there now where he attained enlightenment after looking for 6 years. And I left a copy of my book under the tree of knowledge, which is there at the actual spot, and a new thank you note as a gift to Buddha, just because I don't believe I would have been able to write the book and accomplish the things I've been able to do unless I had integrated his teachings into my recovery lifestyle. I'm like that much of a believer. I'm really that much of a believer.
That's awesome. Well, we are so out of time, and I'm so glad you came on, and our listeners are going to love to hear about all the amazing things you're doing. And how do they reach you? How can they reach you? Give us your plugs.
Sure. So they can reach me at, we have a website, spiritualadrenaline.com. We have a Facebook page. We have about 80,000 Facebook fans on that page now. So that's just do the search on Facebook. And then we have a smaller, about 1,000 people in a sober active community page. And then the last thing is you can check out our Instagram account. And then one more thing, I also promote sober active communities like Addict to Athlete, like Recovery Fitness, the Phoenix, Temperance Training that are organizing all around the country. So you can learn a lot about sober active communities on any of our social media.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate it. We'll get everything up, and you have been listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes, where all of our guests have amazing stories and things they have done. We are an inspirational podcast hoping to make your day better. Have a great day, guys. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you, guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. I may be awake, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gate. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. To believe. I took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying. Now I'm so far from